What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy, and let me just ask, have you ever found yourself saying, I'm not good enough? I don't know about you, but honestly, if I really look at myself, I am far too guilty of this. There are times when just kind of almost subconsciously, it's not even like I'm putting any effort into it, but I'll tell myself things like, oh, I didn't get that job because I'm not good enough. I didn't meet enough of their qualifications, or I didn't have the right personality type. But it winds up being, in my thinking, like I'm not good enough. Somewhat recently, I've kind of found myself thinking that my faith life doesn't seem to be going anywhere because I'm not good enough, or more accurately, because I'm not putting enough effort into it, or something like that. And I mean, sure, there are things that I could do to, add more faith practices, but doing more faith stuff isn't necessarily always benefiting the overall health of faith. I don't know for sure where this all got started in my head, but it's something I've been wrestling with a lot. Part of it's just a mixture of people around me, or not even necessarily directly around me, just different sources, I'll say. Different sources that, have been placing these seemingly negative situations in front of me that can be viewed as me not doing enough, or not trying hard enough, or just not being good enough. And the thing with that is, it's all about your perspective on it. It's not necessarily in every situation like you can just slide by with not putting in effort and, not trying to do your best and that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying here. But everybody has their limitations. Everybody, has things that they're just naturally good at and not good at. And if you spend your whole life trying to force yourself into something that you're not good at, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it makes it so much more difficult than taking a path that you would just kind of more naturally fall into, that takes advantage of your natural gifted strengths and abilities. And really, in some ways, I feel like that's what I'm doing to myself, pursuing youth ministry as a career, because if I'm honest, I'm not the greatest at being social. I'm not a great conversationalist all the time, especially in groups. I'm not that great at introducing myself to people I don't know. And there's all sorts of stuff like that I'm not great at. But again, that doesn't mean it's impossible. When you look at stuff in the Bible and what that says about us being good enough, or, doing things through our own effort, a lot of times you'll find that ultimately it's not about our effort and how much we put into it. You look at something Paul wrote, I forget where it is exactly, but in one of Paul's letters, he talks about how if we should boast in anything, we should boast in our weaknesses. I mean, here was a guy that, was very, very religious, like super duper so. Even before he became a believer in Christ, he was very zealous for the Jewish faith And in fact, it was to the point where he was out persecuting Christians because he believed what they were saying was heresy. That, no, Jesus was not the Messiah. Stop going around spreading these lies. That's what he was thinking. Until he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and all that kind of stuff happened, and his whole life changed. Literally encountered God, and, believed from that point on in Jesus. So then that same zeal and fervor in his, Jewish faith then translated over to spreading the gospel of Christ. And it was not in his strength, in his religious knowledge and zeal. It wasn't that alone where God did the best work in him. It was at his weakest points. It was often while he was in prison that he was able to write these letters and to spread the gospel so much further beyond what his physical travels and things like that did. And so he says, if anything, we should boast in our weakness, because he doesn't say this because part, but a lot of times it's seen as, we should boast in our weakness because that is where we know, those are the areas in our lives where we know that it's not us really doing what we're doing. It's God stepping in despite our weakness and doing his work. And I mean, you can look at other verses that talk about, we're saved by faith and not by works. So then we won't be able to boast as if we were somehow able to save ourselves. And all this stuff that, we tend to look at, especially in our culture and society today. It tries to push us to find this one thing that we're super amazing at, and that, we can be known for. But that's not how God works. God is not... We're not saved through just being really good at something. We're not saved by just doing all the good things. Similarly, our lives are not all about just that one thing that we're good at. Even despite the modern culture of getting internet famous for one thing. Culture is stupid as it is anyway, because everybody wants to be famous for that one thing, and then once you're famous for that one thing, everybody wants and expects that one thing from you, but then at the same time, you keep doing it, and after a while, everybody's just like, this is boring, you need to do something else. Like, what? So, let me get this straight. You know me for this one thing, and you want me to do this one thing, but at the same time, you think it's getting boring, and I need to switch it up? How do I do the same and yet different? Just look at video games. And the culture thought process around video games, and you'll get a lot of what I'm talking about there. So, again, don't follow the stupid cultural idea and trend of how you should live your life. Just try to find that one thing that you're good at. Because what good is it to be super amazing at, say, basketball, but then, oh geez, you get injured, you can't play basketball anymore. What the heck do you do? You've spent your whole life on basketball, so now you're terrible at everything else. And there could be a whole big nature versus nurture debate integrated into this conversation, but I'm not going to go there, because that could be a whole lot longer than I have time for. But I guess the point out of that is, like, if you put effort into things, you're going to get better at them most of the time. There are certain limits, just because of how we're naturally built and gifted, but ultimately, again, going back to the main point, it's not about us and our gifts and how we can make ourselves look good. Especially if you're a Christian and, you're concerned with doing God's work and spreading the gospel and all that kind of stuff. It's not so much about your strengths. In fact, a lot of the most inspiring stories typically come from people who were super terrible at something. Like, they were addicted to drugs, or they, were in some really horrible family situation, or even just their lives in general seemed to be, by cultural worldly standards, hopeless. But yet God worked in them and through them, and now they've overcome that obstacle, whatever it is. Those stories, most of the time, when people are giving these big testimonies about their lives and their faith and that kind of stuff, those are often the ones that hit the hardest. So that's kind of what I mean about the whole boasting in your weaknesses thing. It's not about what you have done, but what God has done and continues to do in you, through you, around you. And so this whole I'm not good enough mentality, while it's still something that I'm probably going to struggle with some, I mean, that's something I need to work on. That's apparently another area of weakness that I'm hoping God can move me through and potentially past, or at least, get me to a point where this is not like I'm bashing myself over the head for every little thing. I'm not saying I do that now. I just exaggerating for the sake of emphasis, obviously. But again, point being, the I'm not good enough mentality. Really, okay. I mean, there are two ways, I guess, that mentality could play out. If you have a mostly negative attitude towards it, then it tends to keep you from doing things because you're just sitting there thinking, nah, I'm not going to go sing at this place because I'm not a good enough singer. But then there is kind of a better way to, when you encounter those moments, not necessarily completely avoid them or feel ashamed of them, but if you realize that God is working through you, it's like you might realize that there's something you're not good at, but then approaching it from that standpoint of, hey, you know what? Rather than me saying I'm not good enough, think of it as God is working on me in this area. And then it becomes a whole lot more of an effort to just say, okay, maybe I need to put a little effort in to get better at this, or maybe I just need to wait on God's timing. Maybe I need to just relax, take it easy, not be too hard on myself, and let God do his thing. So, anyway, that's just kind of stuff that's been going through my head recently. Let me know what you think. If you're that same type of person, if you have other ideas and ways that you kind of combat this thought process, leave some comments. Or if you have any other ideas and things you want me to talk about, just let me know down below. And as always, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Just take a look down in the description right below this video. You'll see all the different ways to keep up with my videos and interact and all that good stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. So I hope you're all doing well, and hopefully I will see you next time. Stay cool, people.